Hello, welcome to Anthropology 350, Archaeology of the Middle East. This is a subject that I'm very passionate about, as you'll see. My specialty is the archaeology of the Middle East, and in these kind of few videos at the beginning, I just wanted to kind of give you an introduction to myself, how I got interested in archaeology of the Middle East, a little bit about what we're going to do this semester. We'll go over the syllabus a little bit, and then we'll start getting into the material. Okay, well, why study the ancient Middle East, or the ancient Near East, as some people term it? As we're going to talk about, these are loaded terms. Obviously, if you're talking about the Middle East or the Near East, near to who? Obviously, it's near to Europe. These are Eurocentric terms that are not always used by people because of the kind of baggage of colonialism. So sometimes people call it archaeology of Southwest Asia, or maybe specifically archaeology of Mesopotamia. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that. But the focus of the class, even though we're going to look at the Middle East in general, we're going to focus several weeks on Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, which is now in modern-day Iraq and Iran. So what's so interesting about the Middle East, the ancient Middle East? Well, it's a land of firsts. You see many of the hallmark changes in human society happening first in the Middle East. So it serves as a good comparative example to other civilizations. And even if you may not decide to go into archaeology of the Middle East, and many of you won't, having a knowledge of the archaeology of the Middle East will provide a good cross-cultural perspective on other societies that you examine. So the ancient Near East, or the ancient Middle East, saw the world's first agriculture, the development of food production, as we're going to talk about. This laid the groundwork for the first civilizations, the first large-scale state societies with cities. And in fact, many people believe that the world's first city in the world was the city of Uruk, now in modern-day Iraq. We also, because the ancient Mesopotamians wrote on clay, and we'll talk about why they did, in cuneiform letters, or cuneiform characters, as you can see here, clay preserves very, very well. So we have an enormous body of literature and economic texts from ancient Mesopotamia, and that really gives us a window into this ancient world. I'll also add that the ancient Middle East serves as the background for the Old Testament, for the Bible. And in fact, the Old Testament was written down in kind of a finalized form when the ancient Judeans, the ancient Israelites, were in Babylon in the 6th century BC. Many of the events, as we're going to see, that are described in the Bible took place in time periods that we're going to examine. We're going to look at, for example, the Assyrian Empire. Many kings from the Assyrian Empire are mentioned in the biblical books of Kings and Chronicles, and also Isaiah. And so, to understand the cultures and history of the ancient Middle East is to better understand the biblical account, the culture that the biblical account was written in, etc. Right? Also, some people believe, and there's debate about this, but some people believe that the roots of Western civilization lie in the ancient Middle East. As you'll see from some of the readings, some people don't like to draw a direct line, or some people object to that because it's sort of setting the Middle East up as a precursor to Western civilization, and ignoring some of the later Middle Eastern civilizations that were obviously the descendants of ancient Mesopotamia. Okay, well, let me give you a little bit of a background on how I got interested in archaeology and also interested in the ancient Middle East. Okay, here's my email. As we go over the syllabus too, I'll point out my email again. Do not hesitate at all to contact me about anything in regards to the class. Okay, so when I was young, elementary school, middle school, I was very interested in history, especially medieval history. Loved reading stories about ancient battles or medieval battles and things like that. Didn't know much about archaeology. There wasn't a lot on television about archaeology, occasionally on PBS. This was back in the 1980s. I was very interested in history and also archaeology. Got to visit some Native American ruins in the Four Corners area of the United States, Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. I knew a little bit about Heinrich Schliemann and his search for Troy, but I didn't actually know what real archaeology was until I got to college. And I went to a small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania, not too far from Philadelphia. And because my college didn't have a lot of archaeology and anthropology courses, I ended up going to the University of Pennsylvania a couple times each week to take classes there, like in a class just like this one, an Origins of Civilization class. And again, my understanding of archaeology was very rudimentary at that time. I knew about Heinrich Schliemann. I thought archaeologists, and I knew about Indiana Jones, of course. I thought archaeologists went after lost artifacts or tried to authenticate ancient mythology. Basically went after treasures and things like that. And it wasn't until I took a class with this professor at the University of Pennsylvania, his name's Bernard Wales, that I really understood what anthropological archaeology was and what archaeologists actually do. Because in the class, what he taught us was that archaeologists want to answer big picture questions, right? That it wasn't enough just to, let's say, find the remnants of a sphinx from ancient Egypt or find a treasure from a burial from ancient Mesopotamia, but to explain change, to try and look at some of the big questions in human history. Not just when did agriculture happen, but why did it happen? What were the events leading up to it? Why did agriculture develop at a certain point? Why not earlier? Why not later? Also, using cross-cultural comparisons was very important. By comparing and contrasting civilizations, you could point out things that are common between civilizations, but you could also point out important differences and see how human societies work differently in different areas of the world. And so using anthropology and holism and looking at big picture questions is what archaeologists actually do. Try to explain changes in human history and not just describe what is going on. And this was a big, important change in my development, because it was at that point that I realized what archaeologists actually do, and I realized how much more interesting the subject was than I had previously thought, right? That archaeologists try to do important things by looking at these unsolved questions and trying to answer them, right? And again, these big questions like, why did this happen? Why do civilizations collapse? Trying to explain these changes. So, in the summer of my sophomore year, I worked at a field school in Arizona called Homology. It was run by the University of Arizona. And then during the summer of my junior year, I got to go to Israel, and I worked at a cave site where Neanderthals were found. And I also worked at a biblical era city that predates the Bible and also is mentioned in the Bible. And my experience in Israel really got me interested in the Middle East, because I realized just how old the civilizations were. And, being the first doesn't necessarily mean the best, but it's certainly very interesting to work at sites that are just so old and where cities were being created for the first time in human history. Right? And so I decided to specialize in the ancient Near East. In my graduate work, I went to Northwestern University to get a PhD. And I worked at and we'll talk about this site specifically, but I worked at a trading colony in Turkey. It was a little bit like Fort Michilimackinac, but from 5,500 years old. And people from southern Iraq, ancient Mesopotamians, came all the way up the Euphrates River and set up a colony next to local people, and traded with those local people for the resources that they needed. So we were trying to understand ancient trade, and this turned out to be a part of a system that many people recognize as the world's first colonial trading system. Not the world's first trading system, but the first time that in human history where people set up colonies in other areas of the world specifically for trade. Okay, let's take a little look at the syllabus and sort of orient you to what we're going to be doing this semester. Okay, well, let's go over the syllabus. Rather than having Zoom discussion groups, I've decided to make the class asynchronous, so everything can be done on your own schedule. In lieu of class discussion, what we're going to do instead is have discussion on Blackboard via kind of the discussion boards. This will give you a little bit of time to kind of digest the readings. If you let's say couldn't think of something to say on the spot in the class discussion, you'll have time to think of something and write it down and respond to other students' comments. Okay, please let me know. This is a little bit, background on if you need help with anything or if you're having certain difficulties, let me know and I can at least point you in the right direction if I can't help you directly. Okay, so in the class, we're going to focus on, again, the archaeology of the Middle East and looking at some of the large changes in human history, the development of agriculture and also one of those complex societies, right? Civilizations from about 9,000 to 600 BC. We're going to learn about areas such as the Fertile Crescent, which comprises areas of the Levant, which we'll talk about what that means, all these geographic terms, Anatolia, also Mesopotamia. We're going to learn about the ancient Sumerian civilization, later Babylonian and Assyrian civilizations. We're going to look at archaeology as well as culture and history and literature, right? You guys will read portions of the Epic of Gilgamesh and, we'll sort of go over some of the ancient literature from Mesopotamia. Please email me if you have any questions at all during the semester. There's no assigned textbook, but I am going to post PDFs each week, and I'll show you the Blackboard site. Each week in the weekly folders, you'll have a series of readings, as well as links to videos such as this one, and also class outlines to help you take notes. Okay, there'll be 3 open note exams, all 3 of those will be worth about 50% of your grade. The exam during final exam week is essentially the 3rd exam, and it will not be cumulative. So all of these exams will be on a portion of the class material. Reading and discussion board posts is about 20% of your grade. And what I'm looking for is that you're digesting the reading, you're thinking about the reading, you're thinking about what other students write and responding to it. This is also a way to keep you on track each week. With an online class, it's easy to skip stuff and get behind, and you don't want to do that. You want to be on top of the material each week. So you want to have done the reading by the end of the week and responded to the discussion boards. You also will be doing, for 30% of your grade, a research paper on any topic of your choosing that has something to do with the ancient Middle East. Right? It could be problem-oriented. It could be on the debate in Middle Eastern archaeology, or it could be focused on the themes such as gender or craft specialization or ancient warfare. It's really up to you. I'm going to have a series of due dates throughout the semester where you're going to sort of submit a topic, a potential topic, and I'll give you feedback on that, and then you're going to develop your topic more fully. You're going to send me a bibliography at a certain point so I can see that you're on track. And so that you get to a good point before you actually have to start writing the paper near the end of the semester. Okay, so I have all the topics organized, by week. This week we're going to be going over the geography and the background in the Middle East, a history of Middle Eastern archaeology, a little bit of how you excavate in these kinds of sites. And then we'll start getting next week into the origins of agriculture. We'll look at early agricultural sites. We'll look at some famous sites like Çatalhöyük and Göbekli Tepe, which we'll talk about. And we'll start getting into societies that become larger and, as we're going to talk about, more complex. And we'll talk about what complexity means. Some of you have maybe taken Anthropology 215 already, so you know a little bit about complex societies. We'll start getting into the origins of the first cities in the Uruk Mesopotamia. You'll have an exam, open note, week 6. We'll look at writing and the beginnings of the Sumerian civilization. You probably remember Sumerians from 6th grade social studies. We'll look at later Sumerian civilization, then start getting into the world's first empire, the Akkadian Empire, periods after that. So Old Babylonian period, that's a period of Hammurabi. Then we'll look a little bit at the Bronze Age and the end of the Bronze Age, which is a very interesting time period, especially because of the way it ended with major catastrophes all over the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Then we'll start getting into the Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires. These are the empires of Nebuchadnezzar, the famous empires mentioned in the Bible. Look at the Persian Empire, and then the last week we'll look at some controversies and problems in Near Eastern archaeology, such as destruction of archaeological sites, looting, the illegal antiquities market, and also the misuse and abuse of archaeology for nationalism and ideologic purposes. Okay. So this is kind of the schedule. Everything related to the class will be posted on Blackboard. So let me show you the Blackboard site. So here is the Blackboard site. Everything related to the class I'll post on Blackboard. I'll use Blackboard to send announcements and messages and things like that. The syllabus is located over here. I'm going to put links to library resources that you'll be able to use for your paper. Each week, I'll post something in the weekly content section. So I'll have folders for each week, week by week. So, for example, in week 1, I'll put the readings for the first week. I'll put any assignments that are due, links to videos, and outlines to help you take notes.